on the Orion Talk Radio Network in 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York. It is TGIF, and my esteemed guest today is Dr. Courtney Brown. Welcome to the show, Courtney.
Gwen, it's great to be back on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Courtney, we survived the Mayan calendar that's really an Aztec calendar. And
yeah.
I'm happy that we're all here to have the show today.
Actually, that was so funny, that Mayan calendar thing. You know, we have our own remote viewing project that I'll summarize or discuss maybe in a minute. But we have data, it's a prediction type of experiment that we have for up to June 1st, 2013. And it was so difficult discussing the science of that experiment without people sort of associating it with the Mayan calendar and December 21st, 2012. And so I'm so glad that that date is passed so that we can talk about our experiment without having that garbage sort of in the middle. I had put on my Facebook page, I said on all my radio interviews, you know, the world's not going to end December 21st. Our data have nothing to do with the Mayan calendar. It's on our website at farsight.org. But you know, it was impossible to get that message through. So now that the date is passed, I'm hoping we have an opportunities for people to actually see. We have a really interesting experiment dealing with prediction in time, and it's going to be very interesting over the next 6 months to see how much of those data actually turn out to be correct.
Well, I would like to let our listeners know that Courtney has been a guest on Morning Brew several times prior to today, and his shows are archived at oriontalkradio.com in the archives there. And if you need specific dates, just shoot me an email and I'll give you the dates that Courtney was on the show so that you can go back and listen to those shows, because he lays a lot of the groundwork and the scientific aspect of the remote viewing that was done that we're going to be talking about today. We're not going to get into all of that today because I kind of want him to give us an overview, but I want to talk about some other things. So if you're interested in that background information and actually how he designed the experiment, we have that archived. So, Courtney, why don't you give the listeners an overview? You had 9 remote viewers that participated in this?
Yeah. Now, first of all, understand that I'm the director of the Farsight Institute, and our website is our nonprofit. It's a research and educational institute. It's www.farsight.org, O-R-G, because we're a nonprofit, F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T. And I am the leading scholar in the study of remote viewing as it is performed using procedures that were developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes, or procedures that were derivative of those procedures. It's a mental process. We don't use the word psychic, but it's in that vein. A mental process of perceiving things using highly trained individuals across both time and space, in complete violation of the currently accepted laws of Newtonian and relativistic physics. So those laws have to be amended. But the point is that it's a perceptual thing. It's an intuitive science, but it's very well developed now. I am a university professor, but I do not do any of this research. I do not do any of this research at the university. There, I'm an applied mathematician working in a social science program. So this remote viewing research is done at the Farsight Institute. And again, we work with people who have been trained by usually ex-military people who have been who were in the military programs, both official and unofficial. So anyway, we have a project called the Post-2012 Climate Project. Notice the word post. Or sometimes we call it now the Earth Changes Project, because it was originally designed to use remote viewers to detect climate change, which we were expecting to be minimal. And between June 1st, 2008 and June 1st, 2013. And so we were expecting a very small result, and we were wondering if the remote viewers would be able to detect maybe a small change in sea levels, or perhaps some more storms, a little less snow on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, things like that. And what we found, to our unbelievable surprise, was huge changes. So it changed the nature of the experiment, so we renamed it from the Climate Project to Earth Changes. And the types of results that we got over the 5-year period were very interesting, because we had totally controlled for the data collection process, plus we had public verification of the data collection process using various encryption methods. Tens of thousands of people participated, watching all over the world what we were doing, making sure we didn't cheat. It was absolutely foolproof. There was no possibility of anyone knowing, any of the remote viewers knowing not only the targets, but whether they were remote viewing a target in 2013 or 2008. And nobody could have known that, even because of the randomization processes we used that were tied to a future Dow Jones number. I mean, it was really complicated, but it was a squeaky clean experimental design. And we had targets for Vaitupu Tuvalu, Fort Jesus Mombasa, Sydney Opera House, Australia, Mount Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, U.S. Congress Building, Washington, D.C., Malé International Airport, Maldives, KITV Building, a television building in Honolulu, Key West, Florida, places like that all over the planet, but nothing in Europe or Asia. But still, it was a wide spread of things. And what we found were, instead of like minor climate changes that we were seeing, if remote viewing could be sensitive enough to detect that, we found impacts of what appear to be things like large meteors leading to tsunamis, or maybe you might call them displacement waves, very large waves, and possible volcanism, which was crazy. We were not expecting that. Extensive and forceful flooding of coastal areas. Now again, we were mainly using coastal targets, so we really don't know anything's happening on the inland areas. And then we had excessive solar radiation and storms and other severe weather. And we found the massive self-organized relocation from coastal areas, refugees, and this is anything up through June 1st, 2013. So we're in that window now that this stuff could happen if these data are correct. And then the breakdown of rescue or other notable governing functioning, such as there was no rescue helicopters, no National Guard in any of these data. Breakdown of the food supply system, breakdown of the vehicular transport system, and extensive loss of buildings near coast. So we might call it a coastal event as far as the data are concerned. But again, we don't have inland data, so we don't really know. And this is not a deterministic prediction for June 1st, 2013. It's a experiment to see if these things happen. The good thing about it is if it's a very clear experiment, meaning remote viewing the past and remote viewing the present anywhere, any distance has always been easy, but remote viewing the future has always been the big bugaboo, the hard thing to do. Because we have done a year-long experiment that was published in a leading journal, in a peer-reviewed journal, a scientific journal, the Journal of Scientific Exploration, and that article can be found on our website at farsight.org. Right on the home page is a link to it. A link that says, let me see. It says latest peer-reviewed published research. So you can click on it and see the article. So that was a research into the possibility of multiple realities or parallel realities, multiple versions of us. And that year-long project was tremendously successful. And it did indicate that, in fact, we have parallel universes. And so if we have parallel versions of us, then remote viewing the future would be more difficult, because which future are you getting? But if you're looking at the past, you're not worried about which past. You know exactly which past you want. So the remote viewing under totally squeaky clean blind, double blind, triple blind conditions, it's always easy to get the target that's supposed to be gotten, such as the sinking of the Titanic or whatever, because you know exactly what event you're going to in the past. But in the future, it hasn't happened yet, so you don't know what to get. So anything in any multiple reality could actually work. So that was always a problem.
Okay, Courtney, can you hold that thought right there? We're coming up on a break, and we'll continue this discussion when we come back in just 3 minutes. This is Morning Brew on the Orion Talk Radio Network in 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York. Welcome back to the show, Courtney. So before we went to break, you were talking about the remote viewing experiment that you did. So when you started receiving the data, what was going through your mind? Because you were expecting something a little more minute, I might say.
Yeah, we were expecting to be looking at sessions for, say, Fort Jesus, Mombasa, Kenya, on East Africa, Indian Ocean, and trying to see if we could notice any change between the sessions and just compare a session for 2008 with 2013, June 1st each year, and just to see if there was a difference. And then we were going to compare the two and say which one looked like the weather was a little bit worse. And, we were going to double blind or, the comparison process and things like that with people, judges being able to look at the data and compare the two and see if they could, without knowing which was which, see which one was a little worse, to see if the remote viewing could actually detect this type of thing. But we dropped that whole thing as soon as we started getting the data, because the data were humongous. I mean, there was just no ambiguity. It was just not at all. All of the 2000 and nearly every session, we're dealing with a ton of sessions here. This was at the time the largest data collection program ever used for a single project, which was 113 sessions from these military grade or better civilian remote viewers that had been trained extensively, an average of a decade or more, in the use of these procedures. And so this was really extraordinary. And when we got these sessions, we had 37 for 2008, and almost every single session had everything normal, meaning the tourists were there in Vaitupu, Tuvalu, Sydney Opera House was still doing operas, the KITV building was a normal television studio with all the stuff going on inside there. These remote viewers do not give vague, foggy, fuzzy data. It's really clear descriptions. This is why there's only a few of them on the planet. They have they're really extraordinary to be able to do all of this. But the descriptions of these targets are under totally blind conditions. No remote viewer was ever told what the targets are, and the encryption process that was used made it absolutely impossible for anyone, including myself, to know whether they were doing a 2008 or a 2013 session. So when the sessions came in, the 2008 sessions were just totally normal. And when we looked at the 2013 sessions, there was no need to try to do blind judging for seeing if one session is a little different than the other, to see if there's a little worse degradation in climate, because approximately a little more than 50% of the other sessions had total wipeout disasters. I mean, like total, like a global coastal event that Cliff High talks about sometimes actually happened. And it wasn't ambiguous. I mean, there was no, like Honolulu, Hawaii, where KITV building is. In the 2008 session, there was KITV building. I mean, clear sketches of the building and all the television stuff going on, and the lights and the cameramen, lights and the cameramen, and everything was there. And in 2013, June 1st, we couldn't even find the building. I mean, it was really very difficult to try to judge these things for small stuff. So we said, okay, we're going to have a bigger difference now. We'll call this the Earth Changes Project.
Okay, Courtney, could I just ask you a question? When the data comes in, do they draw pictures?
Really clear pictures. These are really great remote viewers, and some of them are pretty good artists. So they have verbal descriptions of what the target looks like. They go into a room with no information at all, not even verbal communication. So it's just an email saying, there's a target, do your session. They do their sessions, and they know nothing at all about what the target is, and then they scan the pin and send them to the central office as a PDF file, which no one looks at. We then encrypt. We put it up on the website, so the remote viewer is the only one who's seen it, and we encrypt it in 256 military-grade encryption, and then let tens of thousands of people download it, and then all over the world, and to make sure we don't cheat. And then we wait for some random process that's predetermined that will assign that session to a particular location and time, what we call a target. For example, the United States Congress building, June 1st, 2013, for example. So there's no way anyone could know when the sessions are being done, what the target is, or what the time for that target is. And so it's really very squeaky clean. And so for us to see these huge differences between the sessions tells me that either the data are correct and those things are going to happen, or something's really screwy going on and we don't understand what's going on. And so if June 1st, 2013 rolls around and nothing happens, sort of like what happened with December 21st, 2012, if the date rolls around and there's nothing there, well, then people say, well, it looks like the Mayan calendar thing was a bust. And so our experiment could be a bust also, but we have not been totally wrong on any of our major projects, and we've done a whole bunch of major projects over the last 7 years. And so this will be a first for us if nothing turns out correct. So I'm expecting these data will be understandable by June 1st, 2013. But we just have to wait and see what's going to happen. But yeah, these are very clear sessions, very clear pictures. There's no ambiguity about it. Very clear pictures of something impacting the water, producing these huge displacement waves, residents fleeing, getting out of the major cities, the vehicular traffic not working, people are on foot, they're hoofing it. So we'll have, it's a very clear experiment. I mean, it's not going to be ambiguous. Either it happens or it doesn't happen. So we'll have to wait and see.
So we're going to be coming up on a break here shortly, but when we come back from break, Courtney, I want to talk about the different dimensions in the future,
sure.
Because you were talking about that. We can go to the past. We already know that, but what's in the future and what time frame and what dimension that happens in. I want to talk a little bit about that when we come back from our break. But in the meantime, I want to let our listeners know that all of this information is available at farsight.org, and there is a ton of information. There is even a free YouTube program where Courtney walks you through the training on how to become a remote viewer. And maybe when we come back from break, Courtney can kind of give you a brief overview of that. But there's a lot of information about remote viewing, about the experiments that he's done. The one that I find particularly interesting is Mars, the Mars experiment. But all of that information is there, so you can go to his website and check all of that out. Courtney, do you have any other contact information or other websites or anything that you want to give out right now?
Well, the best thing is people should go to the website, farsight.org, and also the best way to you'll see so much information, you may be a little bit wondering how to start. So we designed a DVD called The Farsight Experiments, Volume 1, and there's a link to it right on the home page, and that's the best way to hit the ground running and see what we've been doing over the last few years. We have a new project also that we're working on a DVD for. It'll be available in March, but the remote viewing data are up for it now, called the Atlantis Project.
Welcome back to Morning Brew on the Orion Talk Radio Network in 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York. Check out Super Dave, morning, 7 a.m. on the Orion Talk Radio Network. If you would like to participate in the chat room while the show streams live, you can do so at the website, www.morningbrew.webs.com. I'm on Facebook, Morning Brew at Orion Talk Radio. And also, if you have questions, comments, guest suggestions, or you just want to send fan mail, you can do so at morningbrew@hotmail.com. Okay, Courtney, well, we're down to the second half of the show, and I want to go into the future in doing the remote viewing and the dimensions and the time frames. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. And the question that's most gnawing at me at the moment is, are these dimensions related to our own frequency in our ability to view them or be in those dimensions?
Yes, let me explain that to people because it's a little bit weird. There's a huge gap between our understanding of what must be real and what the physics community accepts as real. So you won't get this in schools now, but you will get it in 50 years. So right now, the physics community has this huge schizophrenic situation where they have a quantum set of rules for things dealing with small things, and then classical or macro set of rules for things dealing with big things. And then they have this imaginary line they call the line of decoherence, which separates the two. And they say one set of rules works for the small and a different set of rules works for the big. But that's really stupid because everything that's in the macro world is based on the quantum stuff, so it's got to be the same. But they're basically in a situation where you have the clear experimental evidence suggesting multiple realities or parallel realities in the quantum level. And on the macro level, everything looks like we have only one of us, so they just sort of say that can't happen. So this debate's been really going on since 1957 when Hugh Everett, who did his PhD under John Wheeler at Princeton, came up with the other worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And the implications were so severe that people ridiculed it. But just now in the physics community, the young professors, mostly assistant professors, young graduate students, are, in the rage about these ideas that have finally come of time. Basically, no one in physics has ever found anything solid, ever. Even, when you go into this desk and you say this desk looks solid or a computer looks solid, it's made of mostly empty space, and then you see, well, there's particles inside, molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles. But when you chase after those with atoms measures, all you find is waves. No one's ever found a solid billiard ball type of thing. It's only waves or frequencies that interact in a state that they call a state of superposition. And so these frequencies are all that exists in the world. And it's very much like frequencies that you see on the radio band. So you have frequencies that are higher and frequencies that are lower. And frequencies that are fairly close together, similar frequencies, that they interact among themselves in a particularly notable way using processes that physicists like to call constructive and destructive interference, where the waves sort of match up and they amplify each other if the peaks hit the peaks and the troughs hit the troughs. But if they hit in the opposite, so the peaks hit the troughs, well, then they cancel each other out. And so basically what that means is that in a vacuum where it looks like there's nothing, there's actually tons of stuff, lots of frequencies in there, but they're all canceling each other out. And when you see something like a subatomic particle, that's where the peaks of one wave are hitting the peaks of another wave, and they're sort of making a distortion of the space-time reality. And so you get something in a state of superposition, and you say that's a subatomic particle. But really, it's just a bunch of waves. So you and I and everything that exists are just a bunch of waves interacting. So anything that happens anywhere is a result of wave interactions. So when we do remote viewing, we're using the human body, human nervous system, very similarly to a radio that is tuning in to a set of frequencies. Now you look at yourself in the mirror in your house and you say, but I see only one of me. And that's because you're tuned in to a set of frequencies, and all other frequencies are being screened out by a very efficient brain that screens out absolutely everything. In a sense, your brain is a very sophisticated, narrow-band hologram generator. And the hologram looks extremely real, and it feels real, and it tastes real, and it smells real. But the reality is that if the frequencies were to change, you would see completely different reality. And so, according to this theory, if you could bring somebody back from a physical person back from, say, 15 years ago, and stand in front of them, and if you could look at them, they would actually look at you and you'd look a little weird, like you might be glowing or something. Your frequencies would be off. They're right, but that's if you could sort of put the two together. But in reality, anything that's in the past or anything that's in the future is literally buzzing at a quantum signature, with a quantum signature that you might say is just simply different, which is why you don't see the future, why you don't see the past. So with remote viewing, these very highly trained people are trained to perceive things that the brain normally screens out, meaning the frequencies are still there, thus the perceptions are still there, but you have to train to be able to see them. It's there, but it's ignored by the brain. And it's like anything else that's ignored by the brain. You have to sort of work with it in order to squeeze it out. And these people actually can see the past and the future, but the future is more difficult, because if there are multiple realities, then these multiple realities can coexist with us and not bump into us simply by having a different frequency, or what you might call a quantum signature or an average frequency. And so this average frequency that puts you into the future, the question then becomes, well, any particular point in the now will have multiple versions, because just slight frequency changes will make it totally different. Just like a frequency change on the radio dial will put you on another spot on the radio dial, and you won't be hearing what you were hearing before. So the question is, when you're going into the future, you don't know what to dial. So it's like turning on the radio and not knowing where to go. So how do you dial in something? So remote viewing the future has always been really tough, whereas remote viewing the past is more like turning on the radio and knowing exactly where you're supposed to be. So you dial exactly into the spot you want to get to hear your favorite radio station. So remote viewing the future, you don't know what radio station to dial into. So you can pick up sort of anything. You're just sort of moving the dial up and down, and you're picking up whatever you pick up. So that's why remote viewing the future has always been more difficult. However, if there is a major event that affects everything on the dial, so that, for example, a major solar storm that sort of puts a lot of static on the entire radio band, then no matter where you are on the dial, you're going to pick it up. So the theory is that for most things, events that occur, what shirt you're wearing, who wins the presidency, those are small events. And there's going to be different versions of those depending on where you are on the dial. However, if there's a big event, like a major global event, then that's sort of like getting the whole dial messed up. And no matter where you are on the dial, you're going to get it. So this post-2012 or June 1st, 2013, post-2012 Earth Changes project seems to be of that magnitude, that it's a global type of thing that will affect the whole dial, or basically all timelines. So that, for that reason, we're thinking that this particular prediction of the future, if the theory is correct, then these data should be correct. And if the theory is wrong, then we'll know by the fact that the experiment will fail. And come around June 1st, 2013, if nothing happens, we know that the theory is a bust. The theory is not right. But this is a really great test for this theory, that the bigger the event, the more space on the dial, or the more timelines will be affected by it. And
okay, Courtney,
yeah.
we're coming up on a break, but we've got a question in the chat room, and we'll continue this discussion when we come back in just 3 minutes. This is Morning Brew on the Orion Talk Radio Network and 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York. Courtney and I will be right back. Welcome back to Morning Brew on the Orion Talk Radio Network and 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York. I am your host, Gwen Caldwell. Courtney Brown is my guest today from farsight.org. Please go there and check out the wealth of information that resides there. And we do have a question in the chat room, Courtney, before we continue our discussion. Someone is asking if you've done any remote viewing past June 2013 date.
Oh, that's a great question. A lot of people ask that. No, we don't have any data for past June 1st, 2013. And we're, in fact, waiting until June 1st, 2013 to close this experiment to see how we did. And then we'll think of starting up a new project. But there's sort of no reason to, go on into another experiment without sort of seeing how we did with this first experiment.
Okay, another question. Cliff High described remote viewing as almost a destiny. He said there is nothing you can do to change what is viewed from happening. They want to know if that's your view as well.
No, I don't agree with that one. I really like Cliff. He's really great. And I'm not sure that's a totally accurate statement with regard to what Cliff actually said. Because, I don't want to comment on, I never like to comment on what other people say Cliff said. Or what other people say, some people say. The basic idea, just to be more general about it, is that according to the theory that I've developed, the bigger the event, the more likely you're going to run into it. And the smaller the event, the more easily it can be circumvented. So this is what the intelligence community likes to do with remote viewing in the first place. Now, officially, they closed down the program in November of 1995, but I am among what I consider a large group of people who are absolutely, totally in the mind that they started up a new program immediately, and it's much bigger now than it used to be. But the basic idea is that that's what they want to use it for, is to use remote viewing to perceive, say, for example, terrorist events, and then to stop those terrorist events from happening. That means that they actually use remote viewing to perceive an actual, say, an explosion. And then using that information, they go and find the people who are going to do it and capture them beforehand, and the explosion is prevented. Then the question is, well, what did they remote view if they prevented the explosion? So they had to have remote viewed another timeline that you then saw and came back and changed the conditions so that you don't hit that timeline. So the basic idea is you can change the future by observing the future, saying, oh, I don't want to go there. So you change what you're doing now, and you don't go there. You go somewhere else. However, if there's a huge event that's in your future, then it's in the future of all these timelines, or almost all of the timelines, and it's impossible to miss that one. So let us say you're driving down the highway and you see a cat in the road. Well, you swerve a little bit and you miss the cat. Okay. You're driving down the highway and then suddenly there's a 18-wheeler, a big truck, that slides and turns perpendicular to the flow of traffic and completely blocks off the entire highway. Well, how can you miss that one?
Right, exactly.
You're going to hit that one. So you could swerve to miss the cat, but because you saw the cat in front of you, that's sort of seeing that as analogous to seeing the future. So you swerve to miss it. You saw the cat in front of you, so you do something. You steer a little bit, and you miss the cat. But the 18-wheeler, what can you steer to miss it? It's blocking off the entire highway, so you're going to hit it. So that's the basic idea behind a big event and a small event. So connecting this to what was said about Cliff High is he's correct. I mean, that statement that was attributed to Cliff High, whether it's, something he exactly said or not, is correct if the event is sufficiently large. So if the event is small, and most events are smaller than enough to...
Than a global coastal event.
Yeah, but a global coastal event affects basically everybody. So in that interpretation of what Cliff High said, based on what this person is saying, then Cliff is totally correct. It's impossible to miss that one because it's blocking the entire highway of our forward-moving train. It doesn't matter what lane you're in. It doesn't matter what timeline you go into. It's still there. That's the theory that's being tested. So the statement that was attributed to Cliff High is correct under those circumstances, but if you're talking about smaller events, they can be circumvented. There's no single one future. But if all the futures are affected, then what does it matter what future you're on? So, but there's no single one future.
Okay, there's another question. Did any of the targets in your June 2013 Global Coastal Event Study survive intact? If so, which ones?
Well, basically, it looked like almost everything was affected. But we didn't have any targets in Asia or Europe, and even South America. So really, we had a lot of places, but they were, we weren't expecting a global coastal event, so we didn't see everything. But nonetheless, of the 113 sessions, 37 were dealing with June 1st, 2008, and we looked at two different timelines for June 1st, 2013, and each of those had 38 sessions. So we're talking about 76 sessions for 2013, and 50% of those sessions, putting both timelines together, describe total wipeout disasters. So that was really not something we had to worry about with regard to statistical significance. That was like clobbering you over the head. You don't worry about statistical significance with some result like that.
Right,
so,
exactly.
For the 2008 sessions, for the 37, we had two sessions that seemed to indicate some disaster content for 2008. But that's 2 out of 37. That's 0.16. That's essentially zero. So that means essentially, if you look at all 37 sessions, 2 divided by 37 is 2/37. That's about as close as you're going to get to zero, which essentially means there's no disaster content in the 2008 stuff. And then 2013, you're talking about 50%. So it's hard to walk away. And with the randomization process that we used, and it's just hard to walk away from those results. I mean, it's just like it's not subtle. So this is a really interesting experiment, and everybody on the planet should be watching it. And again, if you really are interested in the stuff that we're doing, the best place to start, you actually help us to do our research when you get the DVD, because that funds a lot of us. We have very little money, a couple $1,000s in the bank, and everyone's a volunteer. So when you buy the DVD, it really helps us pay the bills and to do our other projects. We have other projects coming out, including the so-called Atlantis project. The data are already up on the website for that. There apparently was a fully technologically advanced, little more than us, human civilization on Earth like 70,000 years ago, and they destroyed themselves. And a DVD describing all of the details will come out in March But the remote viewing data are up now, and that's also available on our website, farsight.org. We have other projects in the works. We've also done a project on Mars, an anomaly on Mars. It's clearly a facility, a base, highly technological base on Mars. We have the exact location. We have really high-resolution NASA JPL, Maven Space Science Systems photographs of it. And we also have a project dealing with the creation of the asteroid belt, which was actually a planet that exploded, confirming a theory from the late, very mainstream astronomer Thomas Van Flandern. And we've done we have this post-2012 Earth Changes project as well, and the Multiple Universes project. So the best way to sort of understand what we do and the nature of what we do is to start with the DVD. Watch it more than a couple times. There's a lot in the DVD, the Farsight Experiments. And on a personal level, I also did a separate project that's separate from the Farsight Institute because it was simply too controversial. But again, working with one of the great remote viewers, Daz Smith, and that was on the crucifixion drama surrounding Jesus Christ. And that was fascinating. That's got its own separate website because it's not part of the Farsight Institute. But if you're interested in that, that's a whopper. And that's www.crucifixionruse.com. So crucifixionruse.com. And that's a really interesting project. It's really fascinating. But again, that was not part of the Farsight Institute's website. We decided not to make that part of Farsight because it was just simply too controversial. But the DVD, the Farsight Experiments, is where to start. And you help us do our research. If you want us to do more research, do more things, help us out.
Courtney, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you and your wife have a wonderful new year, and we will have you back in March. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. We'll be back Monday, noon Eastern Time, on Morning Brew on the Orion Talk Radio Network and 1650 AM, Tonawanda, New York.